You know what separates someone scrolling TikTok for 3 hours from someone who just built a $1 million business in the same time frame? It's not intelligence, it's not luck, and it's definitely not some secret productivity hack you can buy for $29.99. The truth is far more unsettling. There's a psychological operating system running in the minds of the top 1% of achievers that's fundamentally different from everyone else. And today, I'm going to reverse engineer it for you. But here's the catch. By the end of this video, you're going to realize that you've been lied to about time management your entire life. Stay with me. Before we dive deep, let me ask you something. When was the last time you told yourself, "I don't have time for that"? Yesterday? This morning? 5 minutes ago? Here's what's actually happening in that moment. You're not experiencing a time shortage. You're experiencing a priority malfunction. And this is where the 1% operate on a completely different wavelength than the other 99%. See, most people treat time like money, something you spend, save, or waste. But the 1%? They treat time like attention. And attention, unlike time, can be manufactured, multiplied, and weaponized. Let me show you what I mean. The first psychological difference is what I call the attention architecture. While most people operate on autopilot, allowing their attention to be hijacked by whatever's loudest, the 1% have built a fortress around their mental energy. Think about your last hour. How many times did you check your phone? How many browser tabs do you have open right now? How many times did your mind wander while watching this video? This isn't a character flaw. Your brain is doing exactly what evolution designed it to do: scan for novelty, threats, and rewards. The problem? We're living in an environment that weaponizes these instincts against us. Every app, every notification, every algorithm is engineered by teams of PhDs to hijack your attention. But here's where it gets interesting. Research from Stanford's Attention Lab shows that the average person now has an attention span shorter than a goldfish, just 8 seconds. Meanwhile, the 1% have trained themselves to hold deep focus for 90 to 120-minute blocks. How? They've internalized a brutal truth. Every time you context switch, from email to spreadsheet to text message, you're not just losing seconds, you're losing up to 23 minutes of productive time while your brain reorients itself. The 1% treat attention switches like financial transactions. They ask, "Is this worth 23 minutes of my life?" Most people never ask this question. They operate in what psychologists call continuous partial attention, never fully present anywhere, constantly skimming the surface of everything. The 1%, they do the opposite. They go deep, not wide. But here's where most productivity advice fails you. It focuses on tactics. Wake up at 5 a.m., use the Pomodoro technique, batch your tasks. These are band-aids on a bullet wound. The 1% operate from a completely different identity. Let me explain. When you procrastinate, you think it's about laziness. It's not. It's about identity conflict. Deep in your subconscious, there's a story about who you are. And when your actions don't align with that story, your brain creates resistance. Most people identify as busy. They wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. They say things like, "I'm so swamped," or "I barely have time to breathe." And here's the insidious part. Their brain then works overtime to prove that identity true. You become busy to validate your story of being busy. The 1% have flipped the script entirely. They don't identify with being busy. They identify with being effective. There's a massive psychological difference. When someone asks them, "Are you busy?" they don't say yes with pride. They say, "I'm focused on what matters." Same 24 hours, completely different identity, completely different results. This identity shift changes everything. It changes what you say yes to. It changes what you tolerate. It changes what you're willing to sacrifice. Because when your identity is, "I'm someone who only does what matters," suddenly 90% of what filled your calendar becomes obviously irrelevant. Now you might be thinking, Okay, but how do I actually know what matters? That's where the third psychological pattern comes in, and this one is going to challenge everything you think you know about goals. Stay with me. The 1% have what psychologists call an extended temporal perspective, fancy term for something profound. They make decisions based on future identity, not present comfort. Here's what this looks like in practice. When faced with a choice, should I scroll social media or work on my business? Should I binge Netflix or read that book? Should I sleep in or hit the gym? Most people ask, what do I feel like doing right now? The 1% ask a different question. Who is the person I'm becoming with this choice? This isn't motivational fluff. This is neuroscience. Your brain has two decision-making systems. System 1 is fast, emotional, and focused on immediate gratification. System 2 is slow, logical, and focused on long-term consequences. For most people, System 1 runs the show. They're essentially children in adult bodies, chasing dopamine hits and avoiding discomfort. The 1% have trained themselves to pause for just 3 seconds and activate System 2. 3 seconds. That's the gap between mediocrity and mastery. But here's what makes this truly powerful. The 1% have also done something most people never do. They've created a crystal clear vision of their future self. Not vague fantasies, specific, detailed, sensory-rich visions of who they're becoming. When Jeff Bezos was working on Wall Street, he used something he called the regret minimization framework. He imagined himself at 80 years old and asked, will I regret not trying this? That temporal shift from present comfort to future regret is how he made the leap to start Amazon. When Elon Musk was deciding whether to invest his last $200 million into SpaceX and Tesla, he didn't ask, what if I lose it all? He asked, if I don't do this, will I regret it at the end of my life? Different question, different life. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. The 1% understand something about time that completely reframes the game. Not all hours are created equal. Most people think they have a time management problem. They don't. They have an energy management problem. Think about it. You have the same 24 hours as everyone else, but some of those hours, you're sharp, creative, and unstoppable. Other hours, you're basically a zombie pretending to be productive. The 1% have mapped their energy cycles with scientific precision. They know their chronotype, whether they're a morning person or night owl. They know their ultradian rhythms, the 90 to 120-minute cycles of peak performance. They know their decision fatigue threshold, the point where their willpower depletes. And here's what they do with this knowledge. They protect their peak hours like sacred ground. Mark Zuckerberg wears the same shirt every day, not because he lacks fashion sense, but because he's eliminating decision fatigue. Barack Obama does the same thing. Same with Steve Jobs. These aren't quirks. These are deliberate strategies to preserve mental energy for what actually matters. The 1% don't just schedule tasks, they schedule energy. They put their most important work in their peak hours. They batch low-energy tasks during their energy valleys. They build recovery into their calendar the same way they build work. Most people do the opposite. They spend their peak morning hours scrolling email and social media, then wonder why they have no energy for creative work at 3 p.m. They're driving a Ferrari in first gear and complaining about the speed. But here's the uncomfortable truth that's probably hitting you right now. Everything I've just shared, you probably already knew most of it, at least intellectually. So why aren't you doing it? This is the real question, and the answer reveals the final, most important psychological pattern of the 1%. The 1% understand a principle that most people fight against. You cannot rely on motivation. You cannot rely on willpower. Both are finite resources that deplete throughout the day. Instead, the 1% use what behavioral economists call commitment devices, systems that make the right behavior automatic and the wrong behavior difficult. Let me give you examples. Warren Buffett famously keeps a calendar that's mostly empty. Not because he has nothing to do, but because he's committed to saying no to everything that doesn't align with his core priorities. His commitment device? A physical, visible calendar that shows him the cost of saying yes. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, talks about implementation intentions, if-then plans that remove decision-making from the equation. Instead of, I'll work out more, it's, if it's 6 a.m. on a weekday, then I'm at the gym. No negotiation, no motivation required. The 1% design their environment to make success inevitable. They don't keep junk food in the house. They delete social media apps from their phones. They use website blockers during deep work. They put their phone in another room when they sleep. This isn't willpower. This is architecture.